Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We thank GSK for their focus on autoimmune disease and their continued support of Lupus LA. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and as always, I want to thank GSK, our incredible sponsor, for allowing us to tell these amazing lupus stories. Today, we are telling Hayley Weinstein's amazing lupus story. Hayley is a casting director in the reality and game show space, so maybe we'll get a little bit of cool behind the scenes information on how that all works, because I'm sure our audience would love that. But first, we're going to talk all about your lupus story. So hello, Hayley. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Nice to see y'all.
Nice to see you. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, and sort of what your life was like pre-lupus.
So I am the ultimate Valley girl. Grew up here in the San Fernando Valley, originally from Los Angeles. I did spend some time in Paris for a semester, which was great. I did spend some time on the East Coast, Washington, D.C. for several years, but born and bred here in Los Angeles. Grew up. I have two older siblings. And that's pretty much my origin story.
And healthy, you were. Tell me, what kind of activities did you do as a kid?
I was very active, played lots of sports at the time, cheerleading, basketball, softball, tennis, the whole thing. I always ran super, super hot. Like I was the one who, when I played a sport, I got overheated so much where I would be just red flushed and I'd have to sit out. And I remember that. And then I also always kind of had a weight problem. And at a very young age, I want to say right after puberty, maybe 10, 13, I went to a doctor. They tested me. I had hypothyroid. And I come from a family that was very judgmental when it came to looks. They were just very vain in that sense. And so I was always at that point, even though I wasn't chubby, because I was so active in sports, it was always like I felt like I was the fat kid. I look at pictures now and I'm like, oh my God, I was totally normal. But I always grew up sort of with that dysmorphia, thinking that I was heavy. Put on thyroid medicine, struggled with my weight all the way, till now. I've been struggling with my weight. So it's always been, a thing for me to be judged based on, my looks and my weight and all that kind of stuff.
Is it, forgive me for not knowing this. Is it common or uncommon to be diagnosed with hypothyroidism at that age?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. I just knew, there was something wrong with my thyroid. And it's been a constant struggle for me. I've been on thyroid medicine all my life. I was always tired as a kid. I did everything, but I would be exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really think much of it. I thought at the time, not knowing what it was, I always thought it was just related to my weight and my, and my energy levels. But I honestly don't know.
And then, so as that turned into, so there's a physical struggle you're battling, and then there's also this struggle kind of with your family and with peer pressure, and how did that affect you? And do you think some of that stress is ultimately, what sort of popped the lupus out?
After I graduated college, I found this mentor who was in casting and reality. This is way back when Love Connection was on with Chuck Woolery. And I remember working there and just, again, exhausted. And as I started taking these production jobs, as you know, long hours, up till sometimes 2 a.m, doing all this kind of stuff, I just was wiped and I didn't know what was going on. Met my husband, started dating him, and I want to say 1998, got married in 99, had just gone, I think, to an endocrinologist who then referred me to Dr. Wallace. So here I am on my honeymoon. My husband at the time was working on The Amazing Race. So he was traveling all over the world. Here I was by myself, feeling like crap. Finally, we go on our honeymoon and I am just wiped. I don't know what's going on with me. I literally spent the whole honeymoon. We were in a cruise and then we went to New Orleans for Jazz Fest, in my cabin sleeping. So my husband on his honeymoon was out and about on the ship, and here I am at the in the cabin sleeping. Right. It's a horrible honeymoon. Then we go to Jazz Fest.
Now, what was sort of I find that interesting because obviously you're newly married.
Yeah.
Is there frustration there? Is there understanding there? Is there?
Well, yeah. I mean, he was amazing, but I do remember getting engaged. Well, we got engaged, went on the cruise, came back, and then I got diagnosed with lupus. So here I am about to get married like a couple months later. And I said to him, listen, I don't know what's going to be. I understand if this is too much for you, if you want to call off the wedding, I totally understand. This is going to be a lot. And, no, he's been with me. We've been married 25 years. He's always been by my side. He's always been my biggest cheerleader supporter, taking me to doctor's appointments or surgeries or any of that kind of stuff. I'm sure it takes a serious toll on our relationship. I mean, we after 25 years, he gets me. He can just look at my face and be like, and know what's going on with me. Sometimes he'll ask me how I'm doing that day. And, unfortunately, I can't help but be like, I feel like shit. Or I can't even get out of bed. And I'm sure he's sick of hearing that, but he still has that caring, sympathetic. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have a husband that stuck with me and has been there with me the whole time. So I feel very
that's super important. I have the same thing in my wife, and it's interesting. So you actually so on the honeymoon, you knew you had lupus.
Well,
and so
no,
you had just gotten
I think I got diagnosed right after my wedding.
Right after, okay.
Super, super stressful. And then I go on the cruise. And what am I doing on a cruise? I'm laying out in the sun and I'm getting tan and not realizing at that point that sun makes it even worse. So
and then that knocked you out.
And it knocked me out. And I can't remember if I think I was actually got the news right after I got back. Or maybe before I left. I don't know. It was one of the other.
But basically right around that time. So you basically have all this incredible stress. The lupus flares up. You get your diagnosis. Did you respond to the treatment right away? Was there sort of a...
Well, the first thing, I think part of the exhaustion and the complete exhaustion is when I first got diagnosed, they told me I had something called hemolytic anemia. And so here I am walking to the hospital like a zombie. They check me in and they start giving me blood transfusions. So I think that got me out of the woods. I was on super high doses of steroids at the time, intravenous steroids, and then, checked out with 60, 80 milligrams of prednisone. So that was my first diagnosis, which what I've understood is it basically attacks your red blood cells or something like that. And it doesn't, I don't get the whole thing, but attacks your red blood cells, it destroys them. And then your bone marrow can't replace them. So here I'm in the hospital. I think that happened maybe 2 or 3 times. And then I was on some pretty heavy medicines. I think everything from Cellcept to, started with Plaquenil. I basically ran the gamut of all of them. And then eventually I went on Imuran for several years. I want to say 7 to 10 years, which kind of kept it at bay, but my story is basically a roller coaster. It's as soon as I go up, and I'm at my base level and as best as I can possibly be, something else happens. And it's I'm back to square one. And so it's the constant, my lupus is under control, but some other autoimmune or some other issue will flare up. And then here I am at square one again, fighting that. And then that's kind of been my struggle.
And how does that take a toll on you mentally? Because I think that story is fairly common amongst lupus patients, obviously. But I don't know that we've, I think it's really interesting we sort of focus on how strong all these people with lupus are, but how does that roller coaster take a toll on you? Well,
it takes a toll in a lot of different reasons. One, it affects your marriage and it affects your households and all that kind of stuff, because it's you want to do all sorts of stuff and then you crash and all this stuff happens. For me, as a very career oriented person, it was really hard in that sense. I love TV. I always wanted to work in TV, starting out as a PA and a receptionist and working my way up. And so here I am at this point, I get married and I'm probably at not the height of my career, but I'm at a point where it's I'm young enough and I can run departments and stuff like that. And, I'm finally a casting director on a TV show and I'm exhausted. And it's obviously taking a toll on me, and I have the brain fog and I can't concentrate, and I'm doing, emails and making spelling mistakes and all this kind of stuff, not really knowing I'm doing it, going to some doctor's appointments before work, going to some doctor's appointments, leaving early. And never telling anybody that I was sick because I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be, blacklisted, whatever it is. And I ended up getting fired. And I remember just crying. I was so upset. Here was like my first great job. And I was so upset. And I came home and I said to my husband, I was like, I can't believe this. What am I going to do? It's like, and I was heartbroken. I look back now and I'm like, well, maybe I should have told them that I was sick.
Right.
But I think
that was a different time.
It was a different time and it wasn't as accepted and people would have judged me, oh, she can't do her job, blah, 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 blah. So I took a lot of, at that point I had to take time off and get better. But I really felt like career-wise, it was like pulling the carpet out from under me. Like my identity at the time before kids was like, I want to be successful. I want to work in this industry. And it was like, all right, you're done. So that was really, really hard.
And what part of the industry is your husband in? He's a producer also?
He's like a showrunner, writer, director, but he also works in the reality space, ironically. He did many, many seasons on Amazing Race. And I remember at that time when I first got sick, he was working on Race, like running the, everything on Race. And he was traveling a lot and before kids. And here I am on like, I don't know, 60, 80 things of prednisone. And I'm like going out of my mind at home alone. Like I'm knitting every single day because I have so much friggin' energy. I'm like scarves this long. And, and at that time, there weren't even really international cell phones. So it's not even he could really even check in on me. He'd be on some remote island, God knows where I don't know where he was. And I wouldn't be able to call him and be like, oh my God, I'm going through this. And it was really, really hard. Really, really
and
hard.
does that career success that he's having pile on to the frustrations that because you have the capability to be successful in that same industry? I would imagine that's a challenge also.
It was. I mean, we have the kind of marriage where, it's very, especially with kids, like he'll be working, then I'll be home, or I'll be working and he'll be home because I'm a freelancer. So that's, there's part of being a freelancer where you're always looking for your next gig. And if you don't perform well at one particular show, word gets around and then, you're not hired because you want to kind of follow the people that you've worked with. So it was really hard. And I felt like once I got stable enough, after my kids, I adopted my children. It was like, I felt like I had to start over. And so I started again as like a casting recruiter and then a casting assistant and then a casting producer. And so it was a struggle to get back. It was. And it was hard to see him like living the crazy fun life on Amazing Race, traveling the world without me. So it was a little hard.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, incredible that you were able to do it and climb the mountain back again. It's incredibly hard to succeed in this business one time, let alone sort of get knocked down and pick yourself up all while being sick. I think that's incredibly impressive. And I mean, that's a really hard thing to do, especially in the entertainment business where, it's hard to get a second chance. It really is.
Oh, I totally agree. And I was going to say one other thing.
But let me ask you this, did you approach this sort of second time around? Did you tell people about lupus? Were you a little more open?
I'm trying to think if I really think this is the first job I've really been open about it. I told a couple people, I don't know if everybody knows. It's almost been like I maybe at my age or where I am in my career or whatever, that I'm much more open about it and want to advocate for other people that have gone through, the issues and the roller coaster of lupus. Not that I ever, like all my friends, everybody knows, but I always felt like there was a judgment involved that I wouldn't be able to do the job that I was doing. So, and what also was really hard is when I did get fired from that job, I felt like everybody who was at the same level or below me, like leapfrogged over me. Like this person came in, did my job. And then I see her career like taking off because it was the start of nonfiction reality TV and working on big, series that are still on the air. And here I am watching her and I had so much animosity, but it was like, I just felt angry. I was angry all the time that all these people their careers had gone off when it was the height of reality TV. And here I am sick and I couldn't do a thing about it.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Yeah, no, that's really hard.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about your climb back into the driver's seat. And I want to talk about your kids too. So we'll be right back with Hayley Weinstein.
Please visit our online store at lupusla.org. By purchasing Lupus LA products, you are directly supporting lupus patients and their families. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
We are back on the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight, and we are talking about Hayley Weinstein and her fight to get back into the career that she loved. And I think it's a real success story, especially as we talked about, given the roller coaster of lupus. So tell me, I want to talk about your kids, because I know you adopted 2 kids, and I think that story is really important. And I know the lupus, I'm assuming, played a part in that. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about that process.
So I guess it was about 21, 22 years ago. We wanted to start a family. Couldn't get pregnant. I was on Imuran at the time. I believe I was also on a lot of other medicines that probably weren't great to get pregnant on. My doctor at the time said, "Hey, go ahead, try it." I had a fertility doctor after I couldn't get pregnant. So we were doing the hormone shots, which made me crazy as well, but we were willing to try. So I ended up having I think 2 miscarriages. It's hard to remember everything, but anyway, 2 miscarriages. And after the second one, you only have a certain amount of money to do this kind of stuff as well. And it was like, okay, so what do we want to do? Do we want to put our eggs in the basket of doing another, fertility thing, or do we want to start the adoption process? So we kind of, I think, did one more, and we started the adoption process. And we worked with a place called Independent Adoption Agency, which I don't know if they're still around. They closed, maybe they opened back up. And so it was an open adoption, and we did our whole portfolio. You have to do this whole thing, and they show it to, birth mothers and all this kind of stuff. And we did match with someone at the time that was down in North Carolina, this girl who's, I guess, was, with a guy that was in the military. So we matched with her. She wants to, and then we find out 6 months into it that, we got a call. I want to say we got a call from somebody in her family is like, she's not going to give you the baby. This is all a big thing. So we were devastated because here we are, we're ready to have. So that didn't happen. And then so it was about 2 years till we matched with someone else. And it was a really quick match at that point, which is how we adopted our son. So 2 years into it, we matched with this woman. We were actually there for the birth of the baby. We went to the hospital, cut the cord, the whole thing. Adorable little boy, named him Jason. And so that was our journey into adoption. Happened all, very fast at that point. So that was exciting, and then I want to say maybe 6 months, a year later, we get a call from the birth mother of my son. And she says to me, "Hey, I have a friend who's about to give birth. Would you be interested in a little sister?" And I'm like, we were hadn't planned anything, but we're like, okay. So here we have the 2 birth mothers that are friends, and we meet with her, I want to say on a Friday, and she's pretty pregnant. And then she decides to go with us. Literally, I think she gives birth maybe 7 to 10 later on our anniversary. I remember getting the call on our wedding anniversary. Ran out, they're both they're both California girls. Not young girls, but, girls that one of them went to some casinos, has a bunch of kids, whatever. And then the other woman was, a bartender at the time. And I think she, had gotten pregnant by somebody who ended up being married or whatever. And she didn't know what to do. She wanted to keep the baby. And so that's how we were able to adopt these amazing, amazing children. And we were there for the birth of both of them. So we've had them since they were newborns. It was
incredible.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just curious about, because I know my brother and his wife have been through that process as well. And I know there's sort of an extensive, at least now, I don't know back then if it was the same, but there's an extensive look into your life and your husband's life.
Oh, yeah.
How much of the lupus story were you telling?
I'm trying to remember, but I do believe we did. Did we say? I think we did say that I did have a chronic illness, because they did ask me, why are you unable to have children or whatever. So I don't think that was exposed to the birth mothers, but I do feel like I said that to the agency, but I don't think it played a big role at that time. I mean, they could see I was capable at the time. I wasn't super, super sick at that time. So we just sort of not fudged it, but
Right.
I didn't appear. Again, the thing with lupus is people look at you, they don't think you're sick. They don't know unless you tell them that. So, as everybody who has lupus knows, it's like you can feel like crap, but you can fake it and no one will know you're really sick. No, after we adopted Jason, it was my husband who really, really picked up the slack. I was not, and I had a lot of guilt, and I'll go into that in a second, but it was like he was the one doing the nighttime feedings. He was the one at night reading the bedtime stories. I just couldn't do it. I was there as much. I know when we did have the children, he did promise me that we would have help. And that was a big part of it. And fortunately, at the time, we could afford it. But especially because he was traveling everywhere. I could not do it. And I'm so grateful that was an option to me. Because I did have somebody who was just amazing. I'm still friends with this woman who was a nanny to my kids. I mean, she was like family to me. Having the nanny help me with everything. I mean, I couldn't be more grateful to have that. So that was hard. And Evan really stepped up. Like if I couldn't get up in the middle of the night, he'd be the one to bottle. I couldn't breastfeed, obviously. So he'd bottle feed them and do all that kind of crazy stuff. So,
and the kids now obviously grew up with your illness. Mm-hmm. How did that play into their lives?
I think that kids are super resilient. And I don't think when you have kids and you have an illness, I don't think they know any different at that point. I'm the one that had all the guilt. I used to just, I had to see a therapist about it. And I would say, listen, I just feel so bad. It's like my kids come home. Like, unfortunately, my sanctuary is my bedroom. And I know that's kind of played a role also in my life in the sense it's like, if you want to come talk to me, come into my bedroom. I'm in bed. I had a lot of guilt about that because I felt like, okay, I wasn't on a good day, I would be the active mom that would, take them to school and be involved or take my kids to sports and stuff like that. But there were other days, they'd come home from school or whatever, and I'd be in bed and I felt horrible because it's like, how can I be an active parent when I feel like shit all the time? So that was really hard. And I had to go to therapy about it and talk to them about it and just be, it was like, as long as you're good enough and you're there for your kids and you love them, that's kind of how I saw stuff. I mean, and it's hard because I feel like I missed a lot of things in their childhood where I would have wanted to be a more active, involved mom, but it just wasn't in the cards for me at that time. So that's been hard.
So I'm interested to talk a little bit about, you had this difficult relationship with your parents and your mom in particular. How did that affect your relationship with your kids, especially, given the illness and given the guilt you were feeling? How do you think you manage that to sort of not do those similar things? Because I know you have a close relationship with your kids. How did you overcome that hurdle?
Again, I go back to therapy at the time. I did see a therapist that kind of specialized in chronic illness, which was very helpful. Which at the time, there weren't a lot of therapists that did that. I go back, I'm circling back to the weight thing. I think I told you this originally, but like when I sat down with the doctor with my parents, I believe, and I was on a ton of prednisone, so I had the big moon face and the whole thing. And I remember my mom saying, like, her first reaction coming from such a vain family was, well, but is she always going to be this heavy? And I was devastated. I want to say my husband was there too. I was devastated. I was like, really? That's your main concern? That is, I gained 80 pounds or whatever it is. So that was really, really hard. So one of the things that, I never bring up with my kids, and fortunately they're healthy, but I try not to talk about weight issues or food or any of that kind of stuff, because growing up, food was my comfort. When I didn't feel good, or if my parents were arguing or whatever was going on, I'd go to my room and I'd eat whatever, because that was how I self-soothe myself. So that was, that's a big thing. I've tried to be very open with my kids. They've known, they've been adopted for as young as they could understand. They've even met their birth parents. We're on Facebook. They know, they can see pictures. They're not really involved, but they're aware.
Right.
So that's always been an open conversation. And my health has kind of always been an open conversation with them, because I remember my son, I think he was in grade school at the time, and he had to do like an essay or something. And he did research on lupus. So he's really like, he gets it. He's super sympathetic, and he's super, Mom, are you okay? My daughter doesn't wrap her head around. I mean, she knows what's going on, but I don't think she's done the research and been like, oh, my mom has lupus. Let me look it on Google. My son is.
Right.
I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just,
just different ways of coping with it.
Yeah. And I think she gets, even though they're a couple years apart, I think she got different parts of me as a parent than he did as a baby. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I think your story is going to resonate a lot with our audience. And I think the parenting, adoption or no adoption, I mean, how you parent a child when you have a chronic illness is really difficult sometimes. And it does require that the kids have a certain level of understanding and sympathy, and you have to adjust your life. You can't do, I don't run as much with my kids as my friends' dad, my dad friends do. But I do lots of other things, and I think you make adjustments for it. And I think that's part of living with a disease like lupus, especially when you're also trying to rebuild a career. And that's, there's only so much energy you have in a day. And look, you've been successful at both.
Yeah, you come home wiped if you're working. And on another note, which is really funny, like I said, as a kid, I was super active. I played tennis. I was, not that I was a runner. I hated running, but I mean, just active in sports and stuff like that. But I started to develop osteoporosis, obviously, with all the prednisone and all this kind of stuff. And so several times I've broken bones. I mean, as the kids were little, I remember taking my son to like a roller skating event for his school. And, he started to fall, and I went to grab him. I fell, broke my shoulder. Here I am getting run off to an ambulance, so that was like one of the breaks. Then another point, we were like in San Francisco, and we went bowling. This had nothing to do with my kids, but I see this little like baby walking on the bowling alley, and I didn't have bowling shoes on. Went to go pick him up. I shouldn't have done that. The mom should have done that. That's a whole nother story. Fall, broke my wrist on a weekend. So then I had to fly, so I've broken a lot of bones, and it's like, now my husband's like, we need to wrap you in bubble wrap. You're not allowed to roll. You're not allowed to do this. So it's like, I feel like I don't even want to try stuff anymore because I'm too scared I'm going to break something. I think I've broken foot, everything. So that makes it hard to be active too. Even though I'm feeling better, I'd love to be able to do stuff, I've broken my knee. Oh, that's the other thing. Since we had such a crappy honeymoon, on my 5th anniversary, this is kind of irony too. My 5th anniversary, my husband gives me this folder. He's like, okay, we're going to take another honeymoon. It's a showcase from like The Price is Right. So he does this whole showcase in this folder, and it's like, okay, we're going to fly to New York City. We're going to see these Broadway shows, and we're going to go to Europe and blah, 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 blah. It was like written like a showcase showdown. And so like 2 days, and he had taken time off work. I think he had taken 2-3 weeks off of work. I trip and fall at the gas station on the corner, literally like 2 days, and everything was paid for this trip. Shatter my kneecap. So now he has 2 weeks to take care of me. We had to cancel the whole trip. Fortunately, he was able to like cancel stuff. So now we don't even have our second honeymoon. So we've never really had a honeymoon. So, but the irony is, I now work for Price is Right, which is just so funny because I've always loved that show, and I've done casting for a long time. I always thought, oh my God, I want to work at Price is Right and pick out the contestants and do all this kind of stuff. And here I am full circle after the second honeymoon plan that I ruined, and I work at Price is Right. So it's just kind of funny how life works out.
I think you have a terrific attitude. I think it's time for another showcase showdown. You should, when's your 25th coming up, right? So
we just had it. You just had it. So maybe on 30th.
Okay. Maybe for your 30th.
And the funny thing is I'm always sick on our anniversary. I don't know. So it's like he'll plan something. I'm like, I feel bad.
Maybe you should go away at a different time of year.
Yeah.
That's my advice, right?
Yep.
A surprise, just one day. Well, listen, I really appreciate you sharing your story. Is there anything else, any advice you would give I'll tell you what, let's do this. Is there any advice you would give to lupus patients? And then I want to give anybody a piece of advice if they want to try to get on The Price is Right. What's the secret?
Okay, so lupus advice. I really think that as down as you are, as depressed as you are, as crappy as you feel, as effed up your life is dealing with a chronic illness, whether it's lupus or any other chronic illness or autoimmune illness, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And I try and remind myself that even if I'm having a shitty day, usually I'll go to sleep and I'll feel better the next morning. Doesn't always happen, but I kind of like have gotten to the point where it's like, okay, you feel like crap, you go to bed and hopefully the next day will be better or the next day will be better. So I kind of just take one day at a time. And I always tend to think like, even if I'm a flare or whatever, there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Someone's going to help me. I'm going to feel better. Not true, I suppose, for everybody, but that's sort of been my mantra is like, you're going to get through it. You've been through it before. You've had worse. You've been in the hospital getting blood transfusions. And I always try and tell myself also, in the big scheme of things, let the other shit go. It's like, I just have this attitude now. It's like, if I'm angry with somebody or I'm annoyed at work, I'm like, is it really worth it in the big scheme of life when you're dealing with such, intense health issues? It's just, you got to let that shit go.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly good advice. I call it the "this too shall pass."
Yeah. I mean, that's
you can't get totally weighed down in each thing because there's too many things.
There's too many things.
All right. Tell me, how do I get on The Price is Right?
Okay,
What do I do?
The Price is Right. You get your tickets. You are in a big audience. We interview everybody in the audience. You come in, you meet me. I talk to everybody really for like 10, 20 seconds. Just bring that energy, man. Bring that price. You see how people are on the show.
Yeah.
They're so happy to be there. Some of them, it's like their lifelong dream. We have people come from all over the country. You just bring the energy. You bring the, rah-rah. And like I said, it's like, that's what I do for my job. I'm almost like a cheerleader. I'm like, yeah, go, like I'm up and down clapping. I feel like the end of last season, I literally had calluses on my hands so much. So it's like, I have almost like a dual personality. I'm like my Price is Right personality where I'm just go. And then I'm my home personality, but you just bring the energy. And, if you know some stuff about The Price is Right, even better. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm at the point in doing my work where I've worked on some really crazy shows, like really sad shows. I worked on one show with Ann Curry. It was called Chasing the Cure. And it was this amazing show where it was right before COVID because it got canceled right after COVID. But it was a live show where we would bring in doctors and they would literally take people that had unknown illnesses and things like that. So I was a patient producer on that. And I would talk to these people that are going through crazy, crazy health situations and we would try and help them. So that was really joyful. It was very stressful and very helpful.
remember that show. I liked that show a lot. Was it a New York Times show?
What?
Was it part of the New York Times?
No,
is it for a
CBS,
different show? But
I think it was CBS.
Yeah.
Top-notch doctors, and we'd have like kids that had, complex pain syndrome and things like that. They didn't know they had it. So it was amazing. We'd fly them in and do all this stuff. And I've worked on, other medical shows. And for me to like work on a joyful show where people are winning money and brand new cars and trips to, friggin' Jamaica, as hard as it is and as exhausting as it is, I get joy from it. And if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be doing it anymore.
All right. Well, high energy and enthusiasm and knowing the price of milk and eggs and all that stuff is
and
important
know that
too,
we
right?
don't even have eggs on the show right now because they're too expensive.
Oh, yeah. No kidding, right? Well, thank you, Hayley. We really appreciate you being with us. And thanks for doing the show and wishing you good health.
All right. I hope everybody gets something out of this and that, the fight goes on and that we can all just get better and feel better.
Well said. On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.